First, they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew.
And then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist.
Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist.
And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me.
The words we just heard are famous ones written by Pastor Martin Niemöller, who was a German Lutheran pastor during World War II. During Hitler's rise in Germany, he was a national conservative and an initial supporter of Hitler. As the Nazi regime's toll began to become apparent, he opposed the Nazis and was imprisoned at 2 different concentration camps. Finally, surviving his imprisonment, he was released and worked for causes of peace and justice, never forgiving himself for the fact that he could have spoken out more and he could have spoken out sooner. We've come a long way from that time, but as we think about civil rights, we know that there have been many times in history that it's been the right time to stand up, and many times when we have known in our own lives we have not stood up enough. When I was a kid, when there was a job to do that no one wanted to do, my mother would call out, "Who's going to take out the trash, do the dishes, weed the garden?" My sisters and I would rush to respond, 1, 2, 3, got it! Spared from that terrible task at hand, we left the other 2 to duke it out. This weekend we remember the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the causes of racial and economic justice that he stood for. And it would be fair to ask, almost 32 years after his death, why it is that we can quote his sermons and love his words and have a holiday in his name and still see people in our nation, in our state, in our town, divided by the money in their bank accounts and the color of their skin. With all the dreaming and the talking that we do, why is it so hard to make justice in our communities? There are a lot of answers to that question, of course, more than we have time to lift up in a single worship service. So this morning we focus on the seemingly small, very personal ways we come across injustice. We've all been faced with the moment of witnessing something happening that we knew wasn't right. It's right there in front of us. The voice calls us like my mother called to me and my sisters and says, who is going to stand with the person who's being bullied? Who is going to say, that word demeans a whole group of people. It's not cool to use it. Who is going to ask for fairness, even if it means that those who have a lot will have to get used to having less? A lot of the time, inside ourselves, when we hear that voice, who is going to, we respond really quickly. Not it. We don't want to risk having our friends not like us, or risk being mocked, or being beat up, whatever other danger might come from interrupting a wrong in the making. Sometimes we do stand up and then realize the consequences, and wonder if it might have been better to keep quiet. Sometimes it's right to wonder whether the risk of standing up is worth it. This morning, Robin, Eric, and I are going to share our own stories of those times when we have been tempted and sometimes have said, not it. And we'll consider together how more of us might find the courage to be, in fact, it. As we deepen into worship, we light our chalice, the symbol of this faith that unites us, and the fact that we need one another to kindle the light of a new truth in our midst, to build the courage to build that truth in the world.
I was in Los Angeles for work this past fall and had gone to the gym near where I was staying. Morning workout being the only thing that helps me adapt to the 3-hour time difference. As I was getting out of the shower, there was a bit of a commotion going on and a lot of laughter. As I walked by, I saw a group of guys circled around one of the small billboards in the locker room. This gym had these poster-sized displays throughout the facility, things that advertised different health and beauty and food products. In the locker room, there were 2 ads with buff men hawking underwear. Ooh was what one of the men said. Thank you, Henry. He was one of the regular gym members, and he was making a big production of covering up these ads with pictures of women that he had cut out of magazines. I can't believe they make us look at these pictures of naked dudes, he was saying. He went on. It makes me sick that they make us look at these. This stuff is too gay. We're not even safe in our own gym. This isn't West Hollywood. He then took out a roll of tape from his gym bag and covered the posters with the pictures he had brought in. Laughing, he said, "That's better." A few of the other men laughed along, and I returned to my locker to get dressed. He kept at it. To each person who walked into the locker room, he would point at his makeshift art project and say, "Did you see what I did? I'm protecting you guys from that gay agenda. This gym is trying to turn you all gay," he kept saying. More people laughed as they traveled in and out of the locker room. I packed up my bag and left. What an idiot, I thought. Then I sat in my car thinking. There are a lot of reasons I argued that I didn't say anything. If I hadn't been wearing only a towel, I might have said something. I didn't want to start anything. I was late, you see, for a breakfast meeting. People were waiting for me. And what if he got mad? Who knows what kind of trouble he might have started. Besides, I'm just visiting. I would probably never be back at this gym again. It's not my problem. It's not my problem. Not it. Do these words ever surface for you? What happens to us when we retreat into our own smug superiority, our own silence, secure in the fact that I'd never say anything like that? But what does our silence say? What did my silence say that morning? Yeah, that's funny. I agree with you. There's nothing wrong with what you're doing. What do we say when we say nothing at all? These are the questions that I walk with. The words of the great Jewish teacher, Rabbi Hillel. If not me, who? If not now, when?
I was 9 years old, in the 4th grade. It was about a year since my mother and sisters and I had come from Iran to live in Ohio. We came to the United States because there had been a revolution in Iran, and a few months after we left, a couple of months before this story takes place, Iranians took over the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and took U.S. citizens hostage. I was the new kid in school, and I was from Iran. Once the hostages were taken, I would go onto the playground at recess, and kids would pretend to run away from me, frantically shouting, "Get away from her! She might take us hostage!" It was a long road to friend-making. I finally had made a couple of friends, and the kids had simmered down their teasing when a newer kid came to school. He lived just a couple of houses down from me in the parsonage for the Presbyterian church on the corner. He was the minister's son. His name was Johnny, and he was as nice could be. We got on the bus together, and we liked talking and playing while we waited. He was shy and very sweet. He was also mercilessly teased. His pants weren't always long enough to reach the tops of his shoes. His thick, straight blonde hair stuck out in all kinds of funny directions. He talked with a little bit of a lisp. The first couple of days, maybe a week, that he was riding the bus with me, there wasn't any incident. We just found our seats and rode the rest of the way to school happily. But after a week, the other kids seemed to have gotten cued into Johnny's vulnerability, and the torture began. Kids would block seats on the bus to keep him from sitting down. Rumors started at school. Johnny had lice. Johnny ate worms. Johnny had wet his pants. I felt really badly for Johnny. I wanted to tell all the other kids to be quiet, to leave him alone, to tell them what a sweet and gentle friend he was. I would sit on the bus next to my one newly made friend who was joining in the torture of Johnny and felt totally torn. I had only just gotten to this place, on the other side of the teasing. Could I risk standing up for Johnny? I was really shy myself, so shouting anything out was more than I could bear to do, even on a good day. But to shout out my compassion for Johnny to that crowd of kids, every time I tried to get my courage up, the words caught in my throat. I couldn't do it. I felt terribly about it. I knew I wasn't being the friend or the person I wanted to be. But I didn't say a word. So, 30 years later, Johnny, if you see this on YouTube, please accept my apology. In my heart, I have been walking with you this whole time, wishing I had had more courage then, trying to make up for it with different kinds of courage I've learned to use and power that I've gained inside myself as I've grown. The questions I continue to walk with are, if not me, who? If not now, when?
Walking with you is my prayer. Singing with you is my prayer. Leading
was a senior in high school, I had two main loves, well, ones that I considered healthy anyway: feminism and musical theater. The former was a newfound love based on my experience in a senior year class in women's studies taught by a feminist social studies teacher at my New Hampshire public high school. And the latter was a lifelong passion passed down to me from my mother via my maternal grandmother. These two interests were sometimes at odds, frankly. Rodgers and Hammerstein were certainly not in the business of writing feminist manifestos set to music. And the Indigo Girls really didn't have much of a beat you could tap dance along with, much less start a kick line to either. But in the winter of our senior year before Christmas break, the Concord High School chorus waited with bated breath for our music teacher to announce what the school musical would be that year. He announced that our school musical would be based on the Al Cap comic strip Lil Abner, and it was called Lil Abner. He showed us the movie in our chorus class so that we would have an understanding of what it was about, and so we could hear the music before the auditions that were to take place that January. As I watched the film, my excitement about auditions quickly turned to increasing discomfort with the dialogue, particularly the dialogue by and about the scantily clad female characters in the story. I gathered together two of my chorus friends and shared my concerns that the movie was offensively sexist to me. I explained my position using many examples. For instance, the main character, Daisy May, heard such comments from male characters such as, "How is your sweet and well-proportioned little self, Daisy May?" and saying, "My aim in life is to be a good wife." Men treated women as objects throughout. My friends agreed with me. We actually rented the movie and watched it at my house that weekend, hoping to have a different opinion of it when we were done. We didn't. In fact, we became convinced that we couldn't play these female parts as a matter of principle. We decided instead that we would plead our case to our music teacher, who we had been quite close to for the past 3 years in our chorus. We would explain our discomfort, and he would surely change his selection to something more respectable, maybe like West Side Story or something. So two of us went to my teacher when we came back from the break. And rather than hear our concerns and change his mind, as we thought he might, he instead seemed very angry with us for doubting his choice, and worse, perhaps, for implicitly accusing him of sexism. So rather than change the selection of the school musical, he chose instead to cancel the musical altogether. And he announced it to the entire chorus and later to the school why he made that decision, that a group of students had complained that the play was too sexist. Everyone knew that I was the ringleader of this gang of feminists, and as a result, my peers who were looking forward to the auditions the following week were furious with me and quite unforgiving. Robin Bartlett got the musical canceled, was the scuttlebutt around the school. I felt really betrayed by my teachers, and some of my friends, actually most of my friends, backed down on their vocal support of me, really except for one. The local paper and the Associated Press actually picked up the story that week. And that was based on a tip by actually one of the sympathetic parents. And the bad press actually made our school principal angry. We naively didn't understand that this newspaper article might be a bad thing. We thought we'd get pats on the back for standing up for what was right, especially since we were only 17. But this was 1994, New Hampshire, during the height of the political correctness backlash. Some of you may remember this era in history. The story was picked up around the country. by the Associated Press, and my music teacher told the papers that he canceled the musical because my friend and I didn't understand satire and called Will Abner a piece of Americana, like Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer. I was skewered by letters to the editor in my local paper for weeks. Opinion pieces were written about me for weeks. There were even political cartoons in the Manchester Union Leader of me. It's a fact that my father was very proud of. It's one of the most conservative papers in the country. Instead of being referred to as a young champion for equal rights for women, my friends and I were called petulant and immature. And Jim Finnegan, in an opinion piece called Little Comprehension, again in the Manchester Union Leader, wrote, "One would like to believe that these students who take offense at such cartoon characters as Lil Abner, Daisy May, Earthquake Muldoon, Moonbeam McSwan, and Mammy and Pappy Yoakum will mature to the point where they will develop, if not a sense of humor about themselves, at least a sense of the satirical. One would like to believe that in time that will happen. Otherwise, and this would be a terrible tragedy, they could face as adults a dull, humorless, chip-on-the-shoulder existence." Was it true that I didn't have a sense of humor? Did having convictions about justice mean that I would really face a dull, chip-on-the-shoulder existence as an adult? I began to seriously doubt my decision to speak up, and I questioned whether any of this was such a big deal after all. Maybe I was just a misguided, annoyingly politically correct, humorless teenager. I really, really didn't want to be any of those things. Despite the fact that I maintained a tough outward appearance and never wavered in my stance going forward, I rarely actually felt anything but ambivalence and pain about standing up for what I believed in when I protested my high school musical in 1994. Thankfully, my parents were very supportive, and so was my Unitarian Universalist church. And they all got me through. A point of pride that year was receiving the first New Hampshire Young Feminist of the Year award for my protest. But even that actually was a source of some embarrassment and a lot of doubt. Sometimes deciding to be it doesn't give one the glory, pride, or satisfaction of doing the right thing as one might expect it to. The world isn't necessarily gentle, supportive, and kind to those of us who choose to be it, no matter what age we are when we choose it. I'd still choose to be it again, though. For better or worse, sometimes my conscience doesn't allow me not to. Because the questions I continue to walk with are, if not me, who? If not now, when?
Please join me in singing. Walking with you, walking with you is my prayer. Singing with you, singing with you is my prayer. Being We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing.
Each week we bear witness to the world and to each other by collecting an offering. Today we collect our offering for relief work in Haiti. Mercy Corps is a global organization that is able to respond swiftly and effectively to global tragedies. By trade, they are 3,700 financial analysts, engineers, drivers, community organizers, project managers, public health experts, and administrators. But in spirit, they are activists, optimists, innovators, and proud partners of the millions of people who rely on them for food, water, and shelter. Through their good work, may we bear witness to unspeakable loss.
The song that the choir is going to sing was written by Bernice Johnson and Regan, the founder of Sweet Honey in the Rock. She wrote it after being inspired by a poem of the same name by June Jordan. And that poem was written to honor the women of South Africa who stood up against the apartheid regime. There were laws passed at that time that required men of color to carry passports with them at all times. And when that law was extended to include the women rose up in such numbers and such ferocity that the laws were repealed. That poem and this song are an honor of them.
We are the ones, we earn praise thee. We are